What I'm going to talk about today are ideas about the ecology and the evolution of gender differences in subsistence labor. I'm going to be focusing on hunter-gatherers, and I'm going to be using as a case study my work among the Australian Aboriginal group called Mardu, who live in the remote western desert. Now, the question I'm going to be asking is, why is there such a pronounced gender difference in subsistence work among hunter-gatherers? That's the other one. Okay. In the July of 1974, in Central Australia, Jim O'Connell witnessed a legendary emu hunt. A senior Aluwara man named Billy was just back from a 2-week-long solo hunt, covering more than 150 kilometers, all on foot. A huge pack of fast-moving emus had been seen near camp 2 weeks earlier, and he took off with his shotgun to follow them. O'Connell describes the scene when Billy returns. Billy's back. You can just make him out in the dusky light, a thin, rickety figure in white shirt and dark trousers, working his way slowly across camp under a heavy load. It's hard to know how old he might be, but 75 is a good guess. He still hunts, though he's given up the spear and throwing stick for a single-shot 12-gauge. He's squatted down now in an open spot near the middle of camp, unpacking his gear and laying it all out around him. He's got another bag, too, a small burlap sack full of emu fat, cut into strips about 10 by 15 centimeters across, then rolled and wrapped in feathers. Small children gather around him in the growing dark, and Billy gives each one a packet to take back to their family fires. Seems like every household nearby will get a taste. When the last child leaves, Billy moves to his wife's windbreak, spreads his bedroll, and lies down. It's been a long walk. Now, the small bag of emu was all that he had to show for his effort. While he was gone, his wives plural, spent their time digging yams, hunting monitor lizards, picking bush tomatoes, producing much more meat and calories than he ever did. Now, the moral of the tale is that emu are fast, many are pursued, and most escaped unharmed into the bush. The hunter returns with meat, but takes little enough to compensate himself for his effort. So the story is part of a larger narrative about men and women, the sexual division of labor, and the organization of families and economic production. It's meant to challenge the idea that gender differences in labor are a product of married men and women cooperating to most efficiently provision their mutual children. So here's a gender difference that may not be very efficient. Now, this idea is one of the most pervasive ideas structuring the gender division of labor. It's about maximizing household efficiency in production and reproduction. So this idea goes all the way back to Adam Smith. Adam Smith described how a division of labor and a specialization on tasks makes factories more productive. It's the same idea that the economist Gary Becker drew on in the 80s to model families as factory production lines. Women as less skilled laborers who were constrained from some tasks by their better ability to care for children. Men were promoted to others by their greater skill and strength. So this division of labor, like a factory production line, produces more children and produces more wealth and resources via what he referred to as the economy of scale, right? So women specialize in things they're best at. They turn resources into offspring. Men specialize in the things they're best at, making money, or more generally, producing resources for the household to consume. Now, many have drawn on the Becker model to construct their own models of this division of labor as an adaptive, evolved characteristic of the human species that's deeply rooted in the first appearance of the genus Homo or the first appearance of modern humans. Men are hunters, women are gatherers, and this difference is the most efficient division of labor designed to cope with the lengthy dependency period of human juveniles. So mated pairs cooperate in a gender division of labor to provision offspring. And modern human life histories, our navigational abilities, our networking strategies, presumably evolved as a direct result of women's dependence on men's production of large packaged, highly nutritional resources. Or so the standard model goes. There are a few well-known hunter-gatherers that fit some of the expectations of this model. So among the Hadza in East Africa, women primarily acquire low-quality, small packaged food items that are high in carbohydrates, vegetable foods, and then acquire high-quality, large packaged food items high in protein and fat. Women's foods require less travel, less skill, less strength. They show little change in returns with age. Now, similar patterns are observed among the Juntoisi in Botswana, where women collect mongongo nuts and other plant foods. men hunted. And among the Aceh, in the tropical forests of Paraguay, where on forest treks women focused on producing palm starch and other primarily plant food items while men hunted. However, these sorts of divisions of labor are not universal patterns, and there's a great deal of variation among hunter-gatherers in how labor differences are organized and what men and women acquire and how much women acquire relative to men. So first, not all hunter-gatherer women are dependent on male production. So Aceh women on hunting treks in the 80s produced only 10 to 20% of the food that came in, but Hadza women today, more than 60%. Juntwasi women in the 60s, about 60%. Richard Gould's study of Pitjantjatjara women in Southwest Australia in the 1960s suggested that women were producing 90% of all forage foods over a 3-month period. A lot of early cross-cultural work also suggested that there were huge regional, broad-scale global differences in women's production. If you look at the division of labor in places like Oceania, Southeast Asia, Africa, women were very important producers in local economies, and they were much less important in places like North and South America. Now, secondly, women in other societies do acquire animals, and when they do, it is hunting, even if the animals are small. So there's the Agta, the Ainu, the Dene in Canada, where women hunt deer, the Chipewyan, where women hunt caribou and geese, Central African Aka women hunt for duikers and forest pigs, mixed-gender communal hunts for rabbits were common among the Shoshone, most Paiute women hunted ground squirrels and prairie dogs, and in a lot of these old ethnographies, where we have any account of what women are doing, their hunting of small stuff tends to be collapsed under gathering. So we really actually do not know in how many cases, especially with historical evidence, how much meat women really did provide. Third, it's also not a universal characteristic of hunter-gatherer society that production, specialization, and trade is organized around a nuclear family unit, being a cooperating, heterosexual, monogamously married husband and wife. Now, in some societies like the Hadza, women and men seem to have very separate economic lives. So women go out in groups with other women and children during the day. They forage together. They consume most of what they acquire before they return to camp in the afternoon with any leftovers. In other societies like the Aceh and the Inuit, on the other hand, task groups do seem to be organized among family members, and nuclear family units tend to go out together and cooperate together. Now, ethnographies from Australia that are focused on the lives of Australian Aboriginal women challenge many of our assumptions about hunter-gatherers, and the generalization that women specialize on plant gathering as a complement to men's protein acquisition is one of them. So one of the earliest female ethnographers working in Australia, Phyllis Kayberry, found that Walmajari women in the Kimberley in 1935 were using dogs to hunt kangaroo and monitor lizards. She wrote that in actual quantity, the woman probably provides more over a fixed period than the man, since hunting is not always successful. She always manages to bring in something, and hence the family is dependent on her efforts to a greater extent than on those of her husband. In the 1950s, Jane Goodale also found that Tiwi women were active and productive hunters. So here's one with a possum who's checking to see if the cycad fruit is ripe. And Jane Goodall also characterized women as the most consistent providers not only of plant foods, but of meat as well. So large animals, she wrote, were luxuries rather than staples. The same goes for the women of the Western Desert that I work with, Mardu. Mardu grannies, Mardu women, Mardu girls, all think of themselves first as hunters. And on any given day, between about 60 to 70% of the bush food produced is from women's hunting. Women take 55% of the parenti. This is one of the largest species of monitor lizard aside from the Komodo dragon. Parenti are active hunting carnivores. They weigh up to 30 kilos, and they can be longer than 3 meters from nose to tail. This is a small one. Women also take a little more than half of the feral cats. Feral cats spread into the desert starting about 100 years ago, and they were readily adopted as prey by Mardu women. Women also take about 20% of the bustard, which are an extremely large bird, and 6% of the kangaroo. So bustard are the largest flying bird, and the males can weigh up to 20 kilograms. And kangaroo are the largest endemic non-human in Australia. They can weigh up to 80 kilograms. Right? So women are not just taking little stuff. They're taking a broad range of things. The staple prey of Mardu women are the smaller sand monitors, and they acquire more than 80% of them. Now, sand monitors are the most abundant large vertebrate in the desert. They weigh about half a kilo. A single sand monitor provides a good meal for a person. They're active hunters, just like their cousins, the parenti, but they pursue a lot smaller prey. Now, women hunt these sand monitors in two ways, which vary seasonally. In the hot summer months, they track the monitors on the surface, hoping to chase them into trees or corner them in the open to avoid having to dig them out of their dens, because they go really deep in the summer months. In the winter months, the monitors are denned most of the time because it's too cold, and they have to be dug out. And so to accomplish this, and also to aid in the search for fresh dens to increase their return rates, women burn the spinifex grass that obscures tracks and signs. And we'll see if this PC will play my video. Okay, awesome. Okay, so what you're seeing is a typical hunt. It's somewhat atypical in that this was a really wet year in May and a lot of rain had fallen, so the grass is super green. But this grass is interesting because it burns even when it's green. It has a flammable resin that is simply very attractive to fire. So today she's using a lighter. She hates using a lighter. I didn't have any matches. But she'll often use a burning stick, a fire